Let's use real science to debunk meditation myths. This evening's lesson is drawn. Hey, Kevin's here. How you doing, man? Exquisite. I give each of you, Jay and Kevin, I give each of you a bone-crushing hug. Can you hear the vertebra? This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. What is the difference? What follows is a bit of a non-rhyming poem from someone who either is, in a worst-case scenario, given up on what does seem really, really spiritual, or, and this is the one I'm rooting for, someone who really wants to master meditation but is overwhelmed by the desperate and often contradictory misinformation and disinformation, and is simply trying to make sense of it by using non-rhyming poems, perhaps in the tradition of old, what's-his-face? Who was the American poet who liked dive bars? Anyway, so we'll plunge into it. I'm going to give this person the benefit of the doubt and treat them like they are sincere. They want to do this deal. In the penultimate, I have trouble pronouncing that word, in that penultimate passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha promised it's possible to master. Meditation in 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. The only way you can do that is if you cut through the malarkey. And that's what we're going to do right now. There was a spoof movie called Machete, starring, I forgot his name. Kevin, you probably know his name. And of course, there, Kevin, I totally respect Rue and Teddy, but cats don't like bone-crushing hugs. So, back to the person writing the poem. It's possible to do this deal quickly and efficiently, but the only way to do it is to cut through the malarkey. So let's hit it right now. Let's hit it hard. Let's hit it like it owes us money. What is the difference between meditation and paying attention to your breathing? What a wonderful place to start. Now, the philosophers of ancient Greece discovered that if people come from the same civilization and speak the same dialect of the same language, they can still speak across purposes and not understand each other. Therefore, they found that it's crucial to really make sure that the people in the conversation are on the same page. I found one of the most efficient ways of cutting through centuries worth of malarkey and myth and misinformation pertaining to meditation is to view meditation through the lens of neuroscience. Because you may be able to bullshit a neuroscientist, but you can't bullshit a functional magnetic resonance imaging machine. I know, I've tried. It doesn't work. So let's start right there. So what we're going to do is jump ahead in the text at breakneck pace. I hope you took your Dramamine. So, this is what I'm looking for. This bad boy is written. This is a simplified artist's rendering of a cross-section of the human brain. This is the top of the head, and this is the front of the head. This is the back of the head. Now you're oriented. So here's how it goes. Paying attention to our breath is just another way of saying actively concentrating upon our breath. Danny Trejo, thank you. Oh, Lord of the Geeks, Kevin Hayes. So, By the way, Danny Trejo has a couple of vegan restaurants here in LA. I must meet that fellow. Let's continue. So, paying attention to our breath is just another phrase for actively concentrating upon our breath. It is what is taught by many people, often quite sincerely. Now, there is a very brilliant woman, Dr. Rosemary Anderson, PhD, and she put together a wonderful translation of the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. Read it a few times and you begin to sense patterns. And the pattern you'll notice is the difference between yang attributes and yin attributes. And if you persist in reading it, eventually you will see that the author always endorses yin and always eschews yang. Well, what are some yang characteristics? Well, when we are on the path of yang, we tend to indulge our tendencies to be rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. So we will come back to the whole cryptic thing. Whoopsie, that's the wrong one. Let's go back here. There we go. And let's hit this one. We're going to talk about being rigid right now and being controlling. The opposite is yin. When we are on the path of yin, we are indulging our tendencies to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So yes, we will explore the opposite of being cryptic, which is lucid, but we will come back to that later. Right now, we're going to focus on being flexible and laid back, which is the opposite, of course, from being rigid and controlling. Now, breakneck pace, let's go to the right. Here we go. People who are fond of the path of yang, for whatever reason, love the idea of choosing what to notice, choosing what to pay attention to, choosing what to actively concentrate upon. Now, sadly, neurologically speaking, the only way to do that is to use very specific neurological mechanisms, such as our medial prefrontal cortex. Now, this whole prefrontal cortex is a lovely set of tools. It's great if you want to sort, if you want to compare, if you want to contrast, if you want to do math, if you want to do editing, if you want to do detail work of any kind. This is your boy right here. It's fabulous. But ask an athletic coach and they will tell you that regardless of how strong a muscle is, it can be overtrained. In the short term, we will experience the law of diminishing returns. In the long term, we can experience injury, perhaps even disability, which is serious stuff. But what has that to do with our brain? Simply this. Overuse your prefrontal cortex, and according to fMRI studies, that's functional magnetic resonance imaging studies to you and I, they'll notice that overusing our prefrontal cortex will cause this lumpy thing to become activated. The fancy name is the amygdala, and it functions as the seat of our aggression and our anxiety. This is the law of diminishing returns. If we ignore this, when we start getting cranky and anxious, it's time from overusing our prefrontal cortex. It's time to have a rest. Lay down, watch some YouTube, bathe in kitty cat videos, just marinate in the good stuff. It'll help. But if we ignore that, and if compelled by bro science, we try to push through, well, persistently and consistently exhausting our prefrontal cortex can cause us to present with symptoms of depression. And that can do horrible things to your entire body. Nobody wants that. But how about some good news? Glad you asked. Let's gingerly set aside our prefrontal cortex and turn to the subject of mindfulness. Not concentration, mindfulness. What's the difference? I'll tell you right now. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, and whether we feel it or not, we are accessing our sympathetic nervous system. Where is that? It's located in the middle third of our spinal cord. This is why we describe it as being in our central nervous system and not just being in our brain. This bad boy is evolved to help us perceive in a very special way, to help us perceive in the style of yin, to help us to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, which is completely different than rigidly and actively, as if indulging our controlling tendencies, yes? So, we're this path of yin, made possible, sponsored by our sympathetic nervous system. Now, we're able to perceive, but here's the bad news. In this method of perceiving vulnerably and passively and viscerally and randomly, by definition, we're not in control of what we choose, of what we perceive. Therefore, we could perceive all manner of stuff. We could spontaneously and effortlessly, perhaps momentarily, perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. But that's not all. We can also perceive emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. So check this out. You and I are not computers. We're not digital. We're analog. We're old school analog. Cue the pterodactyl. So, we can perceive whole ranges of phenomena, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. Now, if you think that could get overwhelming, you are 100% correct. Well done, you. But fortunately, in a happy coincidence, evolution has given us a solution. Forgive the rhyme. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, it's an opportunity, to meditate. But how does that work? Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, whether we feel it or not, we are wired to access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is found in both the lower third as well as the upper third of that same spinal cord. This bad boy has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Now, just as one goes through life not only having one breath, but many inhalations and many exhalations every day of every year of every decade, they're alive. Similarly, the function of this autonomic nervous system is not to stop us from perceiving certain things or thinking certain things, but rather to notice what's going on in the moment and momentarily to release what's going on. Why? Do we release what's going on the way a major league pitcher releases a baseball at ridiculous speeds? No, we're not throwing stuff away. The moment we're throwing stuff away, we're indulging our controlling tendencies. We're already wired to notice and release in harmony with we're already wired to perceive and release in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation. The big kids call this mindfulness and meditation. It's just a coping mechanism. Our goal is not to control. We're going along for the ride. Think of it this way. What if our life was like a theater? And it's important that we recognize that neither you nor I are the producer, the director, the playwright, or the thespian. We are just the bloke what sits in the audience, sucking on a hard candy, watching the antics going on the stage. That's it. We're just enjoying the show. Whether the show is a comedy, a tragedy, or perhaps even a penny dreadful. We're just enjoying the show, whether it's exciting or boring, pleasurable or painful, interesting or boring. Perception helps us to see what's going on. Releasing helps us to cope with what's going on. It's just that simple. Now, if you're super clever, and I think you are, you could say, well, dude, I have a fully functional central nervous system. Why aren't I completely enlightened? In a word, Urkel. Did I do that? Due to a quirk of evolution, our brain is kind of like the self-storage facility of a hoarder. It's a 3-ring shit show. But here's the solution. It's super simple. Check this out. When we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, automatically this 3-ring shit show of a brain will begin cooperating with our sympathetic nervous system. Similarly, when we silently, mentally, and passively recite the 1-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, this exact same profoundly chaotic brain will begin cooperating with our parasympathetic system. Just by playing with these 1-syllable words, something amazing happens. Decades ago, I was taught, maybe you were as well, I was taught that words guide intention. Intention guides mind. Mind guides energy. Energy guides matter. So we're using words to gently influence our brain. Let's talk about influencing the chaotic, shall we? When I think of chaotic, I think of a pissed off kitty cat. I had a pal, he's passed on, but when he was alive, one time he used to be married to this gal, and the gal found one of his cats underneath the sofa, and she didn't like the cat under the sofa, so she thought she could motivate the cat to leave the hiding place under the sofa with a broom handle of all things. The cat took a dim view of this, and he just hunkered down and looked at her while glaring, the way kitty cats sometimes do. However, my pal, Alan, invited her to take a seat. He then theatrically, melodramatically, walked with loud footsteps into the kitchen, opened a cabinet, put a can of tuna, he wasn't a vegan, put a can of tuna on the counter, turned on the electric can opener, and glanced over his shoulder just in time to see the kitty cat sitting before him, waiting for tuna. So just as we could not force the kitty cat to leave its hiding place under the couch, but we could entice it with the theatrical presentation of tuna. Similarly, it is disastrous to force our brain, or try to force our brain to do things, but we can gently entice it by silently, mentally, and passively playing with 1-syllable words. Now, in this context, it's going to be now that I've shared this information with you, it's going to be so much easier to answer your questions. Here we go. What is the difference between meditation and paying attention to your breathing? Excellent. Paying attention to your breathing is concentration and uses the front of your head, the front of your brain. Noticing your breathing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly uses part of our spinal cord. Relaxing and releasing our observation of the breath during our exhalation, that's meditation, and it's using a different part of our spinal cord. Think of it this way. In a handful of words, paying attention to your breath is active. Noticing and releasing is passive. Yang, yin. Let's continue. What's the difference between meditation and not thinking? Excellent question. When we look at the storied history of Buddhism, many interesting things happen once it spread to China and then Japan. One of the first people to teach dhyana, or meditation-centric Buddhism, in China, real or imagined, was an Indian named Bodhidharma. He taught in a very pragmatic, no-nonsense manner. Many centuries later, a contemporary of the sixth patriarch, whose name I have difficulty pronouncing, the contemporary was named Yongjie Xuanzhui. He composed one of the most popular Zen texts ever. It is known in English as the Song of Enlightenment. It is designed to clarify confusion, not create confusion. Allow me to change the wording. It is designed to dispel confusion, not exacerbate confusion. Now, we'll take these two people, different races, well, I'm not sure that's the right term anymore, but different cultures, they look different, but they taught the same way. We'll put these two guys on the left. Now, the majority of other teachers in China and Japan delighted in confusing their students. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Sometimes people do that because they think it's their job. Often people do that because they don't know what they're doing and they're faking it. And they go their entire careers confusing people, thinking that makes them powerful and profound, but it doesn't. So there's two non-thinking schools of thought. The first is they're really trying to still their mind, and that's indulging or controlling tendencies, and that's the path of yang. Yang will take you many places. Peace, fulfillment are not one of them. Then there's another school of thought that refers to stilling the mind metaphorically. And so stop thinking doesn't mean we literally stop thinking. It means that when a thought comes to mind, we do not actively wrestle with it. We do not actively try to shove it away or repress it. We treat it passively. We notice it in harmony with our inhalation. We relax as best we can during our exhalation. We persist in doing this for 20 or 40 or 60 minutes. And in time, we'll notice that what came left. I once listened to a minister, a very popular minister, I think it was a Pentecostal minister, once said, most evangelists blow in, blow up, and blow out. Most experiences are that way. There was a pop song popular, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, Wrecking Ball. So we can sit in meditation and we can have wrecking ball moments where we recall something painful or imagine something painful. Our job is not to tell ourselves stories. Our job is not to wrestle with it. Our job is to notice it. When we have made a habit of noticing and releasing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, then our experience is as follows. Whatever comes, I let it come. Whatever stays, I let it stay. Whatever goes, I let it go. And that can apply to our relationships as well. We can't make someone love us. We can make someone hate us. With all things, having this centered attitude is so powerful. Let us pretend there are 3 modes, shall we? The first mode is just being completely contrived. The other extreme is possessing scattered spontaneity. That's like that really good idea you think you have after consuming your 3rd consecutive espresso in 30 minutes. The middle point between these 2 extremes, I'm trying to do this without flicking you off, is not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. Meditation uses centered spontaneity and it cultivates centered spontaneity. Centered spontaneity is the secret sauce. It's the key to making everything better. It enhances our choices, utterances, and deeds. It enhances our intelligence, our creativity, our resilience. Let's move on. What is the difference between meditating and trying to meditate? The old trying snafu, eh? Well, that's a mythical hobgoblin created by lazy-minded teachers. Ever hear if someone says to you, ugh, you're trying too hard, that translates as, ugh, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to blame you for not getting my cryptic instructions. Ugh, no. The 3rd enlightenment factor, according to the Buddha. Oh, what's going on here? Guess it's over here. The 3rd enlightenment factor is energy. The 4th enlightenment factor is joy. Put it together and what do you got? Enthusiasm! Like when you come home and your dog's so happy he's just about ready to turn themselves inside out. Enthusiasm. If someone tells you, oh, you're too enthusiastic, they're mistaken. Buddha had no problem with enthusiasm at all. He dug it. So, someone tells you you're trying too hard, they're mistaken, and they're trying to blame you. What's the difference between meditation and being present? Excellent question. So, because humans evolved to think symbolically, in every language, in every culture, there is the use of figurative language. We can't help ourselves. We are wired that way. And so in every culture that teaches meditation, as the centuries evolved, they almost developed a code to speak to meditation. Not deliberately, just because that we're wired to think literally, and then we begin to express it with similes, and then those similes become metaphors, and then tragically, those metaphors get mistaken for literal statements. Allow me to use an illustration, if I may. Let's look at 3 statements. There we go. John is tenacious. Now let's turn it into a simile. John is as tenacious as a dog with a bone. Great, makes perfect sense. Now let's strip that down into a metaphor. John is a dog with a bone. What happens if we take that literally? John is a dog with a bone? Really? Does John prance about on all fours, determined to sniff the asses of strangers? Because I'll tell you, the Karens of the land will not stand for that. It's absurd, is it not? So, in the Tibetan tradition, being present just means being perceptive, being vulnerable. Superficially, being vulnerable to sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, and scents. On a deeper level, it means being vulnerable to our emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings, whether they're pleasurable, painful, interesting, boring, glorious, or grotesque. In the West, being present has come to mean, or often mean, a subtle form of concentration, where it's like, I'm only going to notice these sights, these sounds, right here. And if I see something over there, I can't notice it because it's here. Well, that's just a form of concentration. Concentration is a form of indulging or controlling tendencies, and it's all about yang. Remember, we're called to be vulnerable, passive, visceral, and random. And that includes noticing all that's going on spontaneously, vulnerably, without an agenda. So when someone tells you, so I once knew a dreadful spiritual counselor, and when his client would say, man, I'm struggling with, suicide because I'm just so scared about being able to continue to afford my luxury condo overlooking the crashing waves of Waikiki. So the bonehead of a spiritual counselor would say, well, just focus on the here and now. Just focus on the sound of the crashing waves, the feel of the plush carpet under your feet, the smell of the delicious food you're eating. Those were all active solutions. The passive solution is, if there's a strong, volatile emotion, don't ignore it. If you feel up to it, sit properly, sit sustainably, and work with it, play with it. Let it exhaust itself. If you don't feel like you can do that for 20 or 40 or 60 minutes, then go for a walk with that emotion. It ain't going anywhere. In the wonderful book titled Walking Your Blues Away by the psychologist Dr. Tom Hartman, he talked about how when we go for a brisk walk, we're functionally massaging our hippocampus, helping us to deal with traumatic experiences, which are often related to, there's a wonderful word, it'll come to me later. I don't want to say ideation, rumination. So, depending upon who's using the word, it can mean different things. In the West, being present is a polite way of saying concentrate on certain things, ignore other things. If you're a fan of Mel Brooks and you remember The World's Oldest Man records, he said, this apartment is the greatest apartment, everyone else can go to hell. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to focus on here and now, and everything else can fuck off. That might be funny, but it ain't no way to meditate. Let's continue. What is the difference between meditation and a voluntary boredom? That is an excellent question. The phrase voluntary boredom was coined by students of bad teachers. I love the cutting edge of science. It's very exciting. They used to believe that depression was a psychological problem. Now we've learned that it's a psychological symptom of a physiological problem. They used to teach that only boring people felt bored. But now they know that boredom is your body's cry for dopamine. And there are different neurotypes. Some neurotypes are profoundly efficient at handling dopamine. They're like the guy receiving soup in a bowl. There are other neurotypes that are structured to be inefficient with dopamine. They're like someone receiving soup in a colander. Just as we do not choose to have straight or curly hair, or blue or brown eyes, we do not choose what neurotype we get, but we're stuck with it. I'm neurodivergent as hell with all the tremens, which is great for other neurodivergents because they come to me. I worked out the hacks so they don't have to. So if someone is neurotypical and they want to sit for 60 minutes, they could have a grand old time. For someone who has ADHD, that could be torturous because of the profundity of dopamine deficiency. Therefore, neurodivergent luminaries of the path have developed hacks. The easiest hack is this: just as the pendulum of a grandfather clock swings back and forth, similarly, we can swing back and forth between mindfulness and meditation, and then perhaps recitation, or perhaps a passive contemplation, and then go back. So basically, we're practicing mindfulness and meditation, and then when the time is right, we're adding a dash of dopamine, metaphorically speaking. There you go. Let's continue. And by the way, if you persist with me and meditate with me tonight, you'll notice that. Now, this is a laundry list of questions. I'm doing my best to answer. So it's eating into our practice time. Please don't take that personally. It doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that's how time works. So let's continue. What is the difference between meditation and doing nothing? Once again, it's a question of literal or metaphoric. Metaphorically, doing nothing might just mean we're not actively trying to control our experience. We're not actively trying to concentrate or actively trying to analyze. Literally, we're not doing nothing. Literally, we are cooperating with our autonomic nervous system. We are cooperating with our sympathetic nervous system that is wired to notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. It also means we are cooperating with our parasympathetic nervous system that is wired to physically relax and mentally release in harmony with our exhalation. Now, this is not the same. This requires far less effort than concentration or analysis. But that's what we're doing. We're being vulnerable. And if you don't think vulnerability is a workout, I've got news for you. Have you met your brain? It's a 3-pound terrorist. You're getting ready for bed, putting your head on the pillow, all contented like, and then your brain's a little, psst, hey, Remember that time you totally mortified yourself in junior high? Thanks, brain. So I promise, practicing noticing vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly is not nothing. Let's continue. Is it the case that all these can be meditation, but not necessarily so? No. These are contradicting. Water is not oil. Feces is not urine. Oil is not vinegar. Cats are not dogs. We live in a world with so many interesting things and so many variations of so many interesting things. Tell Jane Goodall that a monkey's just a monkey, and she will go medieval on you. So there are differences. There are things that are beneficial and things that are harmful. Let's go back to our example of the athletic coach. There's a difference between training efficiently, training inefficiently, and crippling your client. And if a coach says there's no difference, then back away from them slowly. They're a danger to themselves. There are ways of practicing concentration and analysis that are harmful, that will exacerbate problems. We are wired in such a way as to have evolutionary instincts that keep us alive. Our body and brain can treat them as a tool, or it can treat them as a tyrant. When those mechanisms become a tyrant, our life is no longer fulfilling. When those mechanisms become mere tools, it creates space for the possibility of fulfillment. There's a huge difference between the two. There's a huge difference between Hannibal Lecter and Jesus Christ. You can say, well, they're both carbon-based, they're both bipedal, they're both mammals, but they're not exactly the same. So if someone tells you it's all the same, they're not in a position to be helpful to you. So we have at the bottom of our brain two motivation systems. We have a dopamine-oriented reward system that rewards for anything that leads to procreation. And then we have an oxytocin-oriented system that rewards for anything that leads to cooperation. It rewards for copulation with pleasure, and it rewards for cooperation with fulfillment. They are different. The Buddha's Four Noble Truths were all about seeing that there's a problem of our instincts failing to be tools and instead being tyrants, and forcing us to major in minors and lead very turbulent, torturous, unfulfilling lives. The liberation the Buddha offers us is liberation from the tyranny of our instinctual drives and the relegation of them back to the role of tools, one of many tools in the garden shed of our mind. The method to get us there is the Eightfold Path. Enlightenment is simply mastery of the Eightfold Path. There are things that contribute and support our practice of that. There are things that detract and undermine our practice of that. They are different. Just as flower may be a powder. And just as strychnine, a rat poison, may be a powder, just because they're both powders doesn't mean they're the same, and they should be handled differently. Let's continue. Does meditation require the intention to meditate, or can meditation be done accidentally or unintentionally? Well, that depends on what your definition of meditation is. If your definition of meditation is concentrating, or your definition of meditation is just spacing out, that's one thing. If your meditation is if your definition of meditation is cooperating with our innate tendency to notice and release our process in harmony with our inhalation and exhalation, then it is somewhat active. It is gently cooperative. So we are gently cooperating with our autonomic nervous system as opposed to manhandling it. I have a feeling I might regret asking these questions. Well, they're on Reddit, and asking a question on Reddit can be likened to the experience of a capybara falling into a piranha-infested tributary in the Amazon. But it's just the case that I struggle to grasp the essence of meditation. And that's not a commentary on you. That's a commentary on teachers. Sturgeon's Law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks, but not in the fun, tingly way. 90% of anything, 90% of meditation teachers, 90% of plumbers are going to be rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. A scant 10% of everything and everyone is going to be defined by being flexible, loving, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. And here is the dark irony. Of these two groups, who do you think is more keen on self-promotion? The yang folk, right? Of these people, who do you think is going to be more gentle and more centered as they walk through life? The yin folk. So the yang folk in every area of life do everything they can to claw their way into positions of power, prestige, and authority, and hold with a death grip the levers of power. And they chew up and spit out the great luminaries. Remember the words of Einstein, and I paraphrase. Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from lesser minds. Contrast, if you will, the tale of St. Francis Assisi versus the Pope. Or contrast, if you will, St. Francis Assisi with Thomas de Torquemada of the Inquisition, not a cuddly fellow. So, in their times, respectively, the fiends who controlled the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Roman Inquisitions were the big muckamuckas. The people who were the most like the real or imagined Christ were not. So the human condition is a tale of tragedy. Evolution is funny. From a certain point of view, many biologists feel that our genes act like parasites, controlling us to do things that undermine our health, longevity, happiness, joy, peace, and fulfillment. Because those aren't priorities to our gene. Our genes only have a very simple priority: pass the genes on to the next generation. Someone who lives from their dopamine-oriented reward cycle will be promiscuous. They will blow up their relationships, and they will be super successful of having lots and lots and lots of unsuccessful relationships and really pass that genetic material, which is exactly what the genes want. So we have two parts, two phases, if you will, for evolution. We have random copying errors, and then we have the feedback loop, which is natural selection. And this is how it works. There's no sentience involved. Organism A experiences a copying error. That copying error, if it creates an effect, that effect is either beneficial, neutral, or detrimental. If it's detrimental, they probably won't live long enough to pass on that genetic trait. If it is beneficial, they probably will live long enough to pass on that trait. That's some low-hanging fruit, but that's how evolution works, good, bad, or indifferent. So, from that point of view, Sturgeon's law makes total sense. It's disappointing, but it makes sense. You have struggled to grasp the essence of meditation because of a lot of misinformation and, sadly, a little disinformation. Not on your part, on the part of others. From reading your words, you are clearly very impassioned and very intelligent and very articulate. Your mind is effervescent and beautiful, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Perhaps its vagueness is a feature rather than a bug. No, it's a bug. It's a bug. The bug is not due to meditation. The bug is due to humanity, as described a few seconds ago. And we can, under the term Sturgeon's law. So, the Buddha taught one could master the Eightfold Path in a week. One need not go on a vast, melodramatic Tolkien quest to become enlightened. One can do it easily, comfortably, pleasurably. Going back to the 7 enlightenment factors, consider them: mindfulness, curiosity, energy, joy, tranquility, balance. If our teachers aren't helping us to access these states, enlightenment is going to be an impossibility. If we are not experiencing these states on the path, it's an indictment not against us, but against our teachers and perhaps our peers. Come, let me share a rather grisly tale with you. I'm a big old vegan, which makes me terribly annoying. But I know what it's like to eat meat. I know what it's like to eat seafood. And around the world, wherever crabs are caught, you will see crabs brought to shore in these great, often blue, rounded off plastic barrels, square barrels. Occasionally, you'll see a crab try to make a break for it. And 9 times out of 10, you'll see that crab's fellows pull it back in to share their doom. I can't tell you how many meditation centers are full of cranky, controlling Karens and competitive chads, and oh, it's just a nightmare. So whether you go to a meditation center, whether you have a teacher, whether you rely on books, whether you rely on live streams, select your teachers carefully. So I've done a lot of talking, and I'd like now to start meditating with you, if that's okay. Let's see here. Yes, yes, Kevin. My brother Geek made a beautiful addition, and I wish I would have noticed it beforehand. Just as Strychnine is not flour, Marvel is not DC. Well done. Okay, so I'm looking forward to meditating with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to meditate like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So let's turn our attention to the latest iteration of the sadhana version of the Song of Enlightenment written by Yongjie Xuanjue, forgive my pronunciation, translated by Red Pine, adapted and amplified by this smook right here. So, having gabbed, let's start just by practicing the fundamental technique I've already taught you tonight. Allow me to refresh your memory, because at this point your brain might be panting. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this during our inhalation, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, we can kick back and watch the antics of mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease during our exhalation, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Together as a team, let us chant the 16th verse. In hateful worlds I see a chance for merit. They have become my closest advisors. Not letting ridicule make enemies of friends. I show the power of accepting the metaphor that nothing is born by relaxing into my exhalation. The most efficient way to cope with the cruelty of others is to choose vulnerability during our inhalation and release during our exhalation, which are the 7th and 8th folds of the Buddha's Eightfold Path. One more time. In hateful words I see a chance for merit. They have become my closest advisors. Not letting ridicule make enemies of friends. I show the power of accepting the metaphor that nothing is born by relaxing into my exhalation. Those of us who have survived the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune of dealing with narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths have the difficult task of learning how to develop boundaries, and we can swing from one extreme to the other, being too flexible our boundaries and being too rigid, enduring too much and enduring too little. People are going to make mistakes. We don't have to be the Lord High Executioner each time. How are we to know when to be firm and gentle with our boundaries? How are we to know the difference between accident and malice? A fringe benefit of regularly practicing mindfulness and meditation is love's centered spontaneity, which can help us to practice, which can help our choices and utterances and deeds to flow from effortless effort. One more time. In hateful woods I see a chance for merit. They have become my closest advisors. Not letting ridicule make enemies of friends. I show the power of accepting the metaphor that nothing is born by relaxing into my exhalation. together. Know the words and know their source, do not over-focus on the emptiness of wisdom's light of perception and cessation. This is not something I alone have learned. Countless Buddhas have realized this too. May we refrain from rigidly grasping at any and every teaching in blindly superstitious faith, and also refrain from ignoring the two truths of both mindfulness and meditation by shoving mindfulness away and grasping desperately at emptiness. For the test of a teaching are the results it generates when you apply it consistently and according to the Eightfold Path, the 7 Enlightenment Factors, and even contemporary neuroscience. Both the sympathetic nervous system and its mindfulness, as well as the parasympathetic nervous system and its relaxation and release, are necessary for health and happiness. One more time. Know the words and know the source, do not over-focus on the emptiness of wisdom's light of perception and cessation. This is not something I alone have learned. Countless Buddhas have realized this too. The lion roars and speaks without fear. Lesser beasts hear and cower in fright. Wild elephants cease their rampaging ways. Sky dragons listen in silent rapture. Our knee-jerk reaction to the Buddha's teachings is what separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls, the wise from the foolish. The lion roars and speaks without fear. Lesser beasts hear and cower in fright. So, the lion's roar is a nickname for the Buddha's teachings. Wild elephants cease their rampaging ways. Sky dragons listen in silent rapture. Why do lesser beings hear and cower in fright? There is a passage in one translation of the Dhammapada that reads, and I shall paraphrase, "Better an hour spent in meditation than a lifetime spent tending a sacred flame." What does that mean? It is far more spiritually beneficial to meditate than to rely on ritual. Ritual that we do is basically out of fear or desire, dread or desire. And meditation is about vulnerability and acceptance. That is terrifying for folks raised to practice religion as a form of witchcraft in an effort to control their circumstances. One last time. The lion roars and speaks without fear. Lesser beasts hear and cower in fright. Wild elephants cease their rampaging ways. Sky dragons listen in silent rapture. So, one moment, if you please. I think it spares jotting down. Behold as I jot. The lion roars and speaks without fear. Lesser beasts hear and cower in fright. Wild elephants cease their rampaging ways. Sky dragons listen in silent rapture. Ooh, look at that. Oh, That's what us big kids call a boo-boo. Un, deux, trois. Let us seal the practice by chanting love and letting go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. This is less about magic and more about simply exercising the neural pathways responsible for empathy and bringing the four bases of mindfulness into the path of empathy. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a Buddha, as a real or imagined Buddha's land. May all minds of all beings clear yet impermanent be as joyfully enlightened as a Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet impermanent be as peacefully loving as a Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.